By the time I was about 2 or 3 weeks roughly into using the Superfast CPA notes, then that's when it really started to not only motivate, but sort of like take the tension off of work or studying so many hours a day to where, I was getting in my main study sessions, I was doing my mini sessions, and I still had my nights available where I was able to spend it with family, friends, watch sports, or, whatever the case might be for that night. I was actually able to kind of like get back to enjoying my hobbies a little bit.
Welcome to another episode of the CPA Exam Experience podcast from Superfast CPA. I'm Logan, and in today's interview, you're going to hear Nate and I talk to Matt. So Matt had your pretty typical start. He started studying for the CPA exam about a month out of his graduate degree, and he went straight into studying the normal method. He was studying for hours after work every day. He was watching the videos, reading the book, taking notes, doing the questions, but again, spending hours doing this every day. He was spending upwards of 7 or 8 hours every day after work working on studying. Again, 7 or 8 hours after work. So his whole life was work, study, eat, sleep. That's all he did. And he did that for a year and a half without passing any exams. The highest score he received during that time was somewhere around 58. And again, he was doing this for a year and a half. He didn't have any time for hobbies. He didn't have any time for family or friends, just studying and work. About a year and a half in, he found Superfast CPA through a YouTube ad and decided, hey, I'm going to go for this. If this doesn't work, then maybe I need to move on. But after just a few weeks of trying the Superfast CPA strategies, he took FAR and for the first time got a much better score. He got a 74. So after just a few weeks, he went from a 58 to a 74. And even though he didn't pass, he knew that this was working, and from then he started passing exams. So in this interview, you'll see how much of a difference it made in his life to change these strategies. He's able to start watching football on Sundays again and spending time with family and friends, and he didn't feel like he was wasting his whole life away. I think you're going to love this interview, and before we jump into the interview, I want to give one more reminder about the Superfast CPA training webinar on superfastcpa.com. Again, it is only 1 hour long, it is free, and we will teach you how to pass the CPA exam effectively and efficiently. So make sure you go check that out. With all that said, let's dive straight into the interview with Matt.
So, when you first started studying for the CPA, where were you at in your career, and what made you want to get your CPA or feel like you needed it?
So I started my CPA journey right after I graduated from grad school with my master's degree. It was probably like a month right after, and I mean, I always had aspirations to get my CPA license all the way back to early undergrad, and yeah, I mean, that was a matter of like that starting of the process where it was pretty much just like your traditional type of approach to it that just obviously then ended up working out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go into that. So, when you started studying, I'm sure you had a review course, and how did it go in the beginning?
Right. So my review course was surgeon. And initially there, I mean, yeah, it was like your standard typical approach. I would go through, well, I would review the textbooks, make my own notes and everything, uh, and then go through the review questions. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of blanking out here.
No
Uh,
Good.
worries.
and then pretty much just I was good, just trying to take the normal approach there. And then when I ultimately got to the point where I was taking my first attempts at the sections, it was quite a reality check where I ended up getting my results, and I think like the results were abysmal. Like I think I was lucky to even get like a 58 on my first attempts there. Uh, After so long, I mean, there was a point where I was putting in all these hours. I mean, probably like 6 to 7 hours every single day after I would finish my days up at work.
Mm.
And obviously, I wasn't getting the results at that point. So, I mean, there was just kind of a point where it's like, I got to find something else that kind of works that'll help, that will ultimately get me to where I need to be, or at least like close to passing.
Yeah.
So you were, just to make sure I'm understanding that, so you were working a full day, like 8 hours, and
Yeah.
then you were still working on your CPA stuff like 6 or 7 hours after work. So like it was just all like an all
Yeah.
day affair, it sounds
Yeah,
like.
all hours of the day. So yeah, I mean, I started my first
Wow.
job in public accounting where I worked in tax, and it was at the same time that I started my CPA
Mm.
exam studying as well.
And
Yeah.
that's, yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of like worst case scenario, right? Like so dedication and hard work was not the issue. And then when you're putting in that kind of time and it's not working, it really quickly becomes, you obviously you start questioning everything. Like, why am I doing this? How am I going to pass these? How long of a period was that where you were
Uh,
studying that long?
it was probably for about a year and a half where
Oh my gosh.
where I was just consistently studying and was not getting the results that I had. And I mean, I was getting to my breaking point at the end of that period where I was like, am I really cut out for this? Am I able to actually pass these exams? And that's when I ultimately came across your YouTube ads. Actually, I mean, they were always coming up on my TV, and it was always like those first like 5 second bits behind it, where it's like, oh, I
Uh,
passed the CPA exam in like 2, 3 months, and of course, I mean, I'm 18 months in at this point, so I'm looking at it as like that sounds absolutely impossible. Like, what's he talking about at this point? But after so long, I mean, once I had those continuous fails, I mean, it was like, all right, I might as well hear him out. What
mhm.
else do I have to lose at this point?
Yep. I've heard that so many times. That exact phrase. Yeah. I don't know what that means for our ads, but that exact thing. Like, I saw your ads forever, and then this happened and this happened. And eventually I got to the point where I was like, what? I've got nothing else to lose. Let me just listen to this. Um, well, okay. So before we go on to that, so if you're working all day and then you're studying 6 or 7 hours, how did that work functionally, like with the rest of your life? Had you just sworn off friends or doing anything fun for that long, basically?
Right. Yeah. I mean, going into it, I knew that it was a matter of dedication. So, I mean, I was willing to put in the hours at that point. So, I mean, I pretty much foregoed any social life or communication. I think it was just pretty much work, study, sleep, repeat at that point. And
Yeah.
what I also ended up noticing was one day I would start studying after a long day of work. I mean, I was already so tired after just like working 8 hours for the day. It's like by the time I was even ready to study, it was hard to even like try and get yourself into those motions of
Hmm.
going through your reviews, doing your test slits and everything else like that, and then you're just exhausted after after days like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest things about studying at night is you're just there's the material that's hard enough to understand. There's finding the time, which is hard enough, but then even if you do that, it's just battling yourself through. It's typically a 3 or 4 hour study session, let alone a 6 or 7 hour study session. It's just okay. So eventually you see our ads or at least listen to them. And then I'm guessing you watch the free training. Is that the
Yeah,
next?
yeah, so that was what came up next is I listened to the 1 hour free training, kind of sat through and like tried to see like what the course was about at that point. And of course, as I'm going through, it's like, okay, there are some points that are kind of making sense as far as like, studying first thing in the morning, the mini sessions, breakdowns, and everything else like that. And so it was once I got through the free training, I saw that the promotion was out there in order to sign up for the course. So I'm like, all right, I'll at least try this for a few weeks. And if I can at least get close to it, then I'll continue with it. But I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if I didn't, obviously, I mean, I was kind of like pondered with it. It's like if this doesn't work, then the CPA exam journey was over at that point. Uh, so I guess that leads ultimately when I did start using the course, I first applied it to FAR at that point. And lo and behold, the very first attempt that I had, I didn't pass my first time, but the very first time I did it with super fast CPA, ended up with a 74 on my first attempt at
Mm.
FAR. So I was like, okay, yeah, I didn't pass, but I got close. It's like, all right, something's working here. So maybe I should, try this out again. And next thing you know, my next attempt, I got over the hump and did the restudy sessions, the restudy methods.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting a 76 and got my first pass in FAR shortly after.
Awesome. Yeah. And that means different things to different people. Like if somebody just passes on their first try, they've only studied for 2 months, it's awesome that they passed. But after going through what you went through, your first pass is just this huge, a huge deal. So I mean, how did that
Oh,
feel to get your passing score after all that?
it was the best feeling on the planet. I mean, it finally like kind of gave that realization, like, okay, it is possible to pass these exams now, and I have the capabilities to pull this off. So now, I mean, that was kind of like the spark right there, where it's just I had all the motivation in the world, and I was just ready to check out the rest of the exams and finish this off once and for good,
Yeah,
once and
and
for all.
were you also able to, not study 6 or 7 hours at night anymore? Like, how did that change?
Yeah, so I completely changed my study approach from there. So I ended up doing 2 hours in the morning there, where I got up first thing in the morning. I went to my office and did my study session first thing. And then I made sure that I fit in plenty of mini sessions throughout the day and would even fit in a second 2 hour session after
Mm.
work. And then I would usually leave the rest of my nights wide open. So it felt like not only was I passing my exams, I was getting a part of my life back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yep. And I was going to ask that after doing what you did the first time, studying 6 or 7 hours after work, and then just going to, 2 hours in the morning, and then I guess you did 2 hours at night. But even that alone, I mean, I'm assuming you just felt like this is insane that this is working, studying like half of what I was studying before.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, honestly, I barely felt like I was studying at all, just with how like naturally it was coming. I mean, really, I was going through it, and I would do my 2 hour sessions were generally, going through the 30 multiple choice questions of whatever I'm doing that day, and then of course cumulatively of what I've built up to that point, and it pretty much just kind of like used it as like a snowball effect. It's just like constant re-review, and it was just constant reinforcement that ultimately I was getting that 6, 7 hours a day in that 4 hour time frame is essentially.
Yeah. Yep. Did you have a question a minute ago, Logan, or no?
Well, my question with that is like, so how quickly, so you start studying with Superfast CPA, and did you notice that you were going through the material more quickly? Like you were doing 4 hours, but were you going through more material? Like were you able to get to your exam more quickly?
Yeah, in a sense. So, I mean, like every time that I scheduled a section for the CPA exam, I gave myself about 4 to 5 weeks to study. And I would usually take that time and break the modules up of each section of the exam week by week. So it's like, first week is the first module, second week you go through the second one, and then cumulatively as that goes through.
Hmm.
And then ultimately, you get to your final review portions there where you're reviewing everything on a regular basis.
Yeah. Uh, Going back to the 6 or 7 hours at night, what did that actually look like? Was a lot of it watching the videos, reading text, or if you're sitting there for 6 hours, what were you actually
Right.
doing?
So
Yeah.
for the first couple of hours, I mean, a lot of it was first like hour and a half was used generally the video lectures that come with a lot of the courses. They're generally about an hour or so long. Uh, and then it was a matter of going through that. I would take notes as the lectures continued. I would take that and try and do a sort of test set of like 50 or 60 questions at one time. And for those that I got wrong, I would always constantly, still continue to make notes in my notebook. That would take probably another extra hour or so. And it was pretty much just a repeat motion of that lesson for the day until that I felt like that I had an understanding about it.
Okay. And so in your mind, where you're putting in that kind of time, again, the first time around, like 6 or 7 hours every night, and then once you switch to our methods and it starts working, I mean, but to be putting in that kind of time originally, as you look back, what do you think was missing that just wasn't working or translating to test day that first time around?
Well, I think one of my biggest weaknesses was when I was going through the material is feeling like that I had to know absolutely everything that was in those textbooks.
Okay.
Uh, just because like you never know when test day comes around, like what they're gonna throw at you. So it just felt like I had to have a deep understanding of all the material. And that was another big part with Superfast that helped me realize is like you don't need to know like every single detail out of each chapter. You just have to be able to drill down as to what the key points out of those chapters are and then just kind of reinforce those. Obviously, they're going to throw some trick questions every now and again, but at least using that to be able to adapt to whatever questions they're throwing at you.
Yeah, that's a really helpful distinction for people that end up listening to this episode. That yeah, the way it's presented in the chapter, it's just like review courses don't come with a set of strategic instructions. Like, right, that's like the whole crux of the issue. And so people just kind of log in, start with lesson one, and they operate under that assumption that, well, if it's in here, I need to know it, I guess. So, and then it's just a huge amount of information, obviously. But then chapter by chapter or topic by topic, what actually funnels down to the questions, that's a very different thing. And it's a lot smaller. So yeah, that leads to my next question. So whether it was from our free training or the pro course videos, either way, what were some of the key strategies that made sense to you that was different from how you were approaching it the first time?
So I think one of the key things was I think it was out of the pro course, the planting the seeds method. As I was mentioning, it was just a matter of, like trying to at least get an idea of like what the key questions are to it, and then just a constant re-review and just coming back to it as far as like what those terminologies were. And a lot of it too was using the audio notes as well. So, I would go through my 2 hour main session. I would probably leave the office for about a half an hour and actually just replay those notes. So that way it's like almost like, all right, you just did it. So you're kind of like reinforcing it from an audio standpoint. So it's like hands-on, visual, and then also audio afterwards. And then at the same time, I mean, it was 2 hours in the morning, and then the 2 hours at night was again a rehash of that. Or if I felt like I already had mastered it, then it's just moving on. It's like, all right, what's tomorrow's lesson plan then, and start getting ahead of it from there.
Yeah. Okay, so you would do a whatever lesson that morning, and then are you saying you would try to find that specific part in the audios just to hear our audio version of it later?
Yeah, so the audios I usually kept that like in synchronization with whatever part of the course that I was going through. So
Okay.
maybe if it was like I was doing reg, and we were going over basis, and I would do my lesson in basis, and then ultimately listen to specifically the audio notes that talks about tax basis.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah.
pretty much it was like kind of like synchronizing the audio notes in the mini sessions with whatever I was doing, and then just kind of kept that going as a cumulative course there.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
How did you do that? Like, did you just kind of have to like scroll through like the audio notes and just, or did you mainly just pick like, sorry, I'm just kind of trying to think through my question. So when you look at the audios in the app, did you just pick like the area that you just studied, even if it was a little bit broader than the specific thing you studied? Were you just going to like kind of the broader section, if that makes sense?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, with the audio notes, and yeah, I would just go for like that, whatever that topic was. I would go to that specific audio, even if it was a little bit broad, because then I still knew
Yeah.
that whatever was going to be covered, I'm going to end up looking over it in the next couple of days anyway. So it was like almost kind of like what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like getting ahead of it, or like kind of getting a head start on the next set on the next lecture there.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense.
And what about, well, yeah, so more on the mini sessions just in general. So I mean, you just mentioned the audio thing. And that's a good idea. And then would you do a bunch of quizzes throughout the day? Did you use our app a lot just throughout like the rest of your day?
Yeah, so the app, I mean, I would use religiously. If it wasn't audios, and I mean, if I was standing in the line at a grocery store, if I was in some sort of waiting room at a doctor's office or whatever the case might be there, then, I would always find a way to fit in those five question mini quizzes. And I would generally try and fit in about 10 to 15 of those mini quizzes a day of just wherever I found that extra, like 5, 10 minutes to look through it. And then, of course, taking that extra time to like read the explanations, whether I got it right or wrong, just to see, like, to make sure I had a better understanding.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And I think one of the big things that really helped too is with the mini quizzes, the use of round numbers throughout it. It was more of a focus on actually understanding on how to go through a formula rather than just like focusing on the numbers that you had. Whereas then I was able to use that to translate that to my main course. And I was like, all right, this is how I did it super fast. So now generally it would translate to my main review course.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what how we try to make the questions, because just like a quick recall of, okay, this is how you do this calculation. Doesn't really matter about the numbers when you're in line, like when you're doing something just for a couple of minutes. But yeah, we purposefully make them more simple like that so that you can just quickly recall like the basic idea behind something. So I mean, I'm glad that worked for you that way.
What about the
Right.
weekends? Did you study longer or differently on the weekends, or how did you structure your weekend study?
So the weekends, I was pretty much just, as I mentioned, when I was using Surgeon, I would break it out by modules. So Monday through Friday, I would always go through that module and make sure I touched every base of it there. And then weekends was kind of like a re-review of that specific module, and then also preparing for the next week's there. So, I would spend, the first few hours, I would go through my main study session, 30 multiple choice questions. I would do maybe like 2 or 3 sets of those on the weekends. And then for the rest of the day, I would just go do simulations based on those same modules and pick those ones out specifically and just continue to practice until I felt like I had an understanding of it. And generally the weekends, I mean, that was probably, I'd say about 6 hours every Saturday and Sunday. So 12 hours over the weekends that I would put
Yeah.
in. And yeah, I was just constantly, yeah, main review questions, simulations, and then if I still wasn't understanding, that's when I would generally go back to the video lectures and kind of try and get a little bit of an understanding. Of course, reading the descriptions that they give you whenever you do answer those questions, taking notes on what I don't understand, and then just kind of going through those motions until I actually, it felt like I had a genuine understanding of the topic there.
Yeah, and that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, when you are looking at an explanation for a question that seems difficult, I think one of the most helpful ways, or I think a mistake people make, is you get this big explanation that's full of numbers and calculations, and people just will stare at it and try to read it like it's a normal paragraph.
Right.
Whereas even if it doesn't make sense, you kind of force yourself to write out the steps in front of you, or like, okay, this number, just start with the first number. Where does this come from and why? But you said going through the motions until it clicks. That's a really good way of thinking about it. You
Right.
can't just stare at this complex solution and just think it's going to make sense where there's a series of steps. It really takes writing out the steps, kind of reperforming it, right?
Right. And yeah, that was a big thing for me too. Is I like, even when I was first implementing the study strategies, I was always one of those people, I like almost wrote down the explanations like word for word as the course was describing it to you and thinking that would help the understanding. Obviously, that doesn't end up working out well for myself and most people. So that's when that taught me that I had to learn to adapt, where I would actually, start writing out the explanations in my own words, or even saying it out loud, or even bringing in some sort of real life scenario that I could somewhat relate to it there. So now it was just like, if you were able to make that connection to a real life scenario, then I would make that note as like, think about, uh, some sort of like football salary or something like that, or some like
Yeah.
sports salaries,
Mm.
something that's able to relate, in real life that would help you make it simplify it and make more sense.
Yeah, no, and that's a very good mental, like a mental model or a thing to keep in mind is, yeah, like what's the substance of what's going on here? Or like if this was a lemonade stand, I mean, I've thought of things in those terms. Like, okay, what is actually going on here? Like when I was trying to figure out foreign currency translation type stuff, just the way that it's written and it's all in jargon, it was just so confusing. But as soon as I would just put it in these normal terms, um, or like to a different situation that was more familiar, then it just
Right.
started to make sense. Yeah, that's a really good strategy. So one question I had that popped in my mind where you said you were using Surgent, did you use, or maybe you started out this way, did you use their whole adaptive approach, or did you kind of use it manually, or did you switch?
It was kind of like a hybrid of the two. So I would use, like the what was it called? Like the smart kind of like ready scores that they would put out to you to
Mhm.
show like where you were at. But that would fluctuate a lot on a regular basis. Some days where I'd have a ready score of like 80 plus, but then I go back to that same material a few days later and all of a sudden I'm down to 50 again. So I always kind of took it with a grain of salt in a sense, where it's
Mhm.
just like make sure you're just reviewing the main points behind it, and then making sure it's like if you are struggling with that, then I would make that a priority to throw that in with my weekend sessions to make sure I actually go back and reinforce that material.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things where it's like I would base it off the ready scores, but I still did it in a linear pattern based on how the course was laid out.
So what how do you get a ready score on a daily basis in Surgent? Like what does that entail? How many questions are you doing for it to give you a ready score or whatever?
So it all just depends on the results that you ultimately get. So you have options where you can do, as little as 5 questions to as many as 50 questions. And
Oh,
depending on what your results are on the specific testlet, then they adjust your ready score accordingly based on that specific one, and then what you've done cumulatively throughout the times that you've tried going back to that specific material.
Gotcha.
So it's almost
So,
kind of like based on an average.
Seems,
okay.
yeah, that seems a little, I mean, to me, I would feel like that would be a little bit stressful.
Subjective. Oh,
Like seeing, yeah, like seeing a constant analysis of myself, and like you said, it just like goes up and down all the time. Yeah, I wonder, like, did you find it effective? Did you like it?
Yeah, there was times where it was frustrating, where it's just like, you're looking at it one day and it's like, all right, good. I've got it like an 80, 85 plus on a ready score. It says that I'm ready to go. But then when I go back to it, the next thing you know, I'm getting 60s. So it's like, all right, well, what am I doing wrong? So
hmm.
I wouldn't necessarily say what there was parts where it was frustrating, but it also kind of served as that reminder where it's just like, okay, maybe you actually do need to at least like touch base on it, or maybe it was just like you misunderstood the question. I mean, there's a lot of different variables that play into it. So I try not to take it too personally in that instance, but I would just use that as a framework. It's just like, all right, well, make sure that we look at that specific question in our weekend sessions.
Yeah. Um, okay. So one thing I was going to ask earlier was, I think you kind of mentioned this, and I mean, I know what you're going to say, but so your first year and a half, like again, working all day, then studying all night, and it's not working. So I can only guess like your motivation is like going like this over time. And
Right.
then you switch to these methods, it immediately starts working and you can study less. So just that alone, did that make the motivation just come easier? I mean, just made it less of a struggle mentally to just sit down and study?
Yeah, so I mean, by the time I was about 2 or 3 weeks roughly into using the super fast CPA notes, then that's when it really started to not only motivate, but sort of like take the tension off of work or studying so many hours a day. To where, I was getting in my main study sessions, I was doing my mini sessions, and I still had my nights available where I was able to spend it with family, friends, watch sports, or whatever the case might be for that night. I was actually able to kind of like get back to enjoying my hobbies a little bit.
Yeah.
That's the question that I had. Like, um, so what things did you basically have to sacrifice while you were doing that year and a half? And what were you able to start incorporating back into your life once you kind of got this going?
Right. So, like a big thing was football season. Me and my close friends are avid football fans, so that was one thing that I sacrificed for that year and a half was just foregoing any sort of football watching on Sundays, and that always felt a little bit defeating. It's like, I'm over here studying 6+ hours a day, and everybody else is enjoying watching the game. So it almost kind of like played into the part where it almost felt defeating a little bit. But then once I, started getting into that routine on a regular basis, then it was like, all right, well, was able to get in early on Sunday morning there and, study from 7 a.m., 8 a.m. until noon or 1 o'clock. And then I had the rest of my days to be able to watch football with my friends. So, I mean, I think that would serve as a great motivator in and of itself,
Yeah.
where I was able to enjoy those things. And then once Monday came around and I was out, ready for my next module, then it just felt like, I could take on anything at that point.
That's awesome. So a few questions on the football thing. So mostly NFL because you mentioned Sundays. Yeah. Where do you live? Like what team are you a fan of?
From Pennsylvania, big Steelers fan.
Okay. Rough few seasons. Frustrating.
For the last few years here, ever since Big Ben left, it's been kind of a rebuild without a rebuild, and it's just a matter of waiting to see who's the next guy up that's willing to fill in those shoes now.
Right. Yeah. Um, and do you and your friends play like in fantasy league together?
Oh yeah, regularly. We have a fantasy league where it's myself, my friends, and then some coworkers as well. It's a 12-team league. Go through that every year. I mean, it's a fun time all
So
the way around.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's like one of my favorite things, which now that football's over, it's like the most depressing month or two of the year, just getting
Right.
used to no football. Um, but you mentioned taking a year off. Like, did you literally not play in your fantasy league that year? Or did you just kind of phone it in?
No, I kind of funneled it in where it was like, I wasn't as involved as I would have liked to be. I might
Yeah.
take like 15 minutes out of the week, set my lineup, and forget about it at that
Mhm.
at that point. But so I mean, I guess that was at least part of it where I was at least participating, but I wasn't actually enjoying or like being a part of it or anything.
So your typical thing is you and your friends would like get together, watch football on Sundays. You've always done that. And you honestly took a year, like a season off from doing that during that year.
Pretty much. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was
wow.
completely forgo to any of it there. And
Mm,
so yeah, I mean, it was definitely refreshing to not only was I getting my studying and I was passing my exams, but I was able to go back and actually enjoy that time with my friends again.
yeah, that's awesome. And that's just huge from a just a whatever it is, maybe not football or whatever your hobbies are, but to like literally pause every anything you enjoy about life, just to study for these exams,
Right.
is yeah, it's a big sacrifice, but especially if it's like not working. I
Yeah,
mean,
and yeah, there was a point where it was just defeating. It's like, I was sacrificing all these time, not getting the results that I was looking for. And there was just a point where it ultimately felt defeating and you felt like you were ready to give up. But then ultimately, of course, I came across the course here, the free sessions, and next thing you know, I passed three of the sections in like a 5 month span and ultimately finished all four of them within a year. So,
yeah.
so I mean, to compress passing all four of them in less than a year compared to the year and a half where I was studying and not passing at all, I mean, it's a night and day difference.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, that is like the quintessential, like just perfect. Like that's the perfect example of just changing your strategies, either a lot or a little bit. You get this massive life difference where, yeah, I mean, that's just awesome.
No, yeah, and like I said, I think like without super fast CB, I think my highest score might have been like close to a 60. Whereas once I started using the materials, I mean, the lowest score that I ever got using the materials was like was a 73 on one of the
Mhm.
sections.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I'm glad it helped that much. Especially you can't be taking if you're a football fan, you can't take years off. Life's too short to miss a season.
Yeah, for sure.
As stupid as it is, it's like, yeah, it's my favorite thing.
Right. But yeah, and I think one of the biggest challenges too was when I got to my final section in BEC. I got through audit, I got through reg and FAR in less than a 6 month span, but it was almost kind of like tripping up at the finish line a little bit there, where it took me 4 attempts to get through BEC, but it was always like right on that borderline. So I
Mm,
remember consecutively where it's like 3 attempts at BEC, it was a 74, 72, and a 74 respectively until I finally got that pass in 78. And I mean, that was my last section. So once I saw that pass, finally saw that passing score, I mean, I was over the moon. I was jumping out of my seat and celebrating and everything.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, I remember, I mean, I was in the you're in the forum, right?
Right,
Um, and maybe we can talk a little bit about the forum too, but I remember like I saw you getting through your exams because I was going through it at the same time and I was just
right.
like, I don't know if I ever commented, but I was like I remembered like I would look for your posts and then you hit that wall of BEC and I was just like, oh man, he's so close. Like I just kept so I remember seeing your when you finally passed it, like that was just it was really cool to like be a small part of seeing that. What so with that, like what kept I mean, I think I kind of know, but what kept you going once you hit that wall? Like were there ever any moments where you're like, oh, like you wanted to give up, but you had because you had three exams passed by that point, so
Yeah.
you probably were propelled by that, right?
Pretty much. I mean, yeah, there was like you got three of them, you got one left. Like you're not going to let one more exam, especially a couple of points, stop you from
Mhm.
finishing this off. I mean, especially when you're that close at like the 74 range, it's literally the difference of a couple of questions. And that's where I think it might have been the difference is maybe just the draw of the exam that I got at that point. And then just ultimately it was just persistence and just finish it off just one more time, and it'll pay off at there. And lo and behold, it did.
Yeah. And when did you get that fourth score? Like what month of was it? It was back in 2023, wasn't it?
Yeah, so that was in July where I got my final passing score.
Oh, nice.
So it was ultimately a year where I got my first pass around that same time in 2022. So I passed FAR in July 2022, and then ultimately finished with BEC in July 2023.
Awesome. So how was this last football season being completely done with the CPA?
I mean, it felt great to actually be able to, go out and actually watch the games and be able to enjoy my friends and not have these tests just hanging over my shoulder. And even the big thing is, me and a really close friend of mine, we're actually trying to visit all the NFL stadiums in our lifetime.
Oh
So
man,
is that
that is
so? Once it,
that's awesome. I want to do that.
Yeah, so we've done three of them so far. We've done Pittsburgh, we've done Cleveland and Detroit at this point. And as a celebration, it was when I passed my third one in audit that we ended up going to the Detroit game at that point. So it almost served as like a motivational tool where it's just like, all right, you got it through. It's like you got one section left. If you get that done, then you can continue this quest and start visiting other stadiums.
Yeah, that's really cool. Let's see. I think I've been to maybe
Let's
4 or 5 stadiums, but yeah. So I mean, there's 32, right? One for, or no, do the Giants and
That's
the Jets play in the same place?
Yeah, so they do, and then Los Angeles here is one. So there's 30 stadiums altogether.
Nice. Yeah, that's a cool idea. I've had that thought. That would be awesome. Let's see. What were we talking about study wise?
about BEC.
Oh yeah,
So
your
what
last score. Yeah.
if I can ask, what was it? Do you know what it was about BEC that was made it kind of that wall for you? Was there like specific topics or what was it? Do you
Oh,
know?
easily cost accounting. Cost accounting was, I never enjoyed it in my undergrad studies, and
Hmm.
I surely didn't enjoy it throughout the CPA exams. And while it was kind of like the wall that was in the way of me passing it, I knew it was just like you just have to get enough of it just to get that passing score, and you never
Hmm.
have to look at it again.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt the same. BEC was literally just a cocktail of everything I hated during my undergrad and my master's. It was just everything that I was like, I never want to study this again.
Oh no,
Yeah.
yeah, no. I purposely saved BEC because of all the rumors saying it's supposed to be the quote unquote easiest exam with the highest pass rates. But I make the argument that BEC is actually the hardest.
I thought it was the hardest
Yeah.
personally.
Well, and they also so they released the ASCPA releases pass rates for each quarter and then like at the end of each year annually.
Right.
And the pass rates for BEC in 2023 just got lower and lower, whereas in Q4 it was like 30% or something. Like it was insanely low. Part of that is
Wow.
because people were attempting it over and over trying to pass it. So
Yeah, I mean, I think
artificially
I
low.
remember seeing it was like BEC was like easily like the most taken exam within that last fourth quarter,
Yeah.
just because it wasn't going to be a thing
Oh yeah.
anymore after the year. And that
Hmm.
was another motivator of mine as well, as I knew the transition was coming in 2024. I only had one section left, so I'm like, I don't want anything to do with the new transition there. So
Right.
it's like anything I
Hmm.
have to do in order to get that out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. That's awesome. You got it all done and that it was that big of a I didn't realize that, your first part of your story was like that you were studying that long. So I
Oh
mean,
yeah, I mean,
that's
it's
like
like
in
certain nights it would be like 4 hour nights where then I saw that wasn't working, so I tried dedicating 6, 7 hour nights, trying to like really put in that time and dedication. And then when you're still not getting those results behind it, there, yeah, it's a really defeating feeling. And yeah, so I'm very thankful that I came across your YouTube ads there and actually gave it a chance there because let me tell you, yeah, I mean, to jump from the 60s range to right on that borderline passing rate, I mean, like I said, it's a night and day difference there.
Yeah. I mean, especially with being able to study so much less and having your evenings back. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, it really made the process that much easier. And now I pretty much recommend to any of my friends, colleagues, or anybody that's trying to go for the CPA exam in the future. I'm always recommending this course now. Is like it'll save you some headaches there going forward.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Yep. Appreciate that. Let's see. The only thing I think we haven't mentioned was did we talk about Sims? Like how did you or you said you would do them on the weekends, right?
Yeah, so I mean, Monday through Fridays, it was all just repetitive study sessions as far as multiple choice questions, and then I would try and break the Sims down into sets where I would do every Saturday like 2 or 3 sets of about 5 to 7 Sims every Saturday and Sunday. So I mean, you were getting a good amount of it in, where it ultimately kind of reinforced it. But then it kind of like transitioned back to the multiple choice questions too. So it's like it added that extra context there as far as like what you might see in the material there. And I think the big
Yeah.
one for sure was like in FAR, where it's like I think there was like certain like financial reporting like simulations that you had to do, or like creating balance sheets or income statements and stuff like that, where it gives you that little bit of extra detail, where that ultimately kind of helped answer trouble questions that I had in the multiple choice questions too. So it almost kind of like translated back and forth to each other.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think it
Yeah.
does.
The Sims definitely, and actually we've heard this a lot lately, like with the people we've been talking to in this batch, that a lot of people Sims just like aren't like a major focus for them, like the MCQs is like 90% of what they do. And these are people that, are passing, such as yourself. So yeah, I mean, they're really just like a different approach to MCQs. So as long as you're learning the material, you'll probably be all right with the Sims. Would you say
Right.
that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even sometimes when it came to simulations, if I just like put a random simulation up, no matter what the section was, and it just looked like this crazy, like long simulation that you wanted nothing to do with, sometimes I wouldn't even bother trying to answer. I would just submit it and just start reviewing what the
Hmm.
explanation was and how things kind of translate into the simulation, and just start taking on notes, and then ultimately refresh that, put my notes away, and then try and piece it together myself as like a practice.
Yeah,
Perfect.
that's kind of the perfect way of doing it. Yep. Um,
Oh, sorry. So I had two questions. I'll try to remember both of them.
Sure.
One more question with it is, uh, another part of the study process. What was your process for like notes, flashcards, that kind of area? What did that look like for you?
So I was never somebody that was really big on flashcards. Flashcards only came into play when there was just like a certain topic that I would struggle with continuously, no matter what I was saying. I mean, I would continuously get those questions wrong. So that's when I would ultimately make the flashcards. But ultimately, I was more of like a notebook user where it's just like, I'd go through my main sessions of 30 multiple choice questions. If I got it right, great. But if I got it wrong, then, read the explanations. And I started trying to like write out my own explanation in my notebook in almost like a flow chart format, to where it's just like, all right, step one, step two on how to solve this. And then ultimately, again, put that aside and then try and practice it again, kind of thing.
so you
Yeah.
were involving because my big diatribe I always go into with flashcards is that it involves forced recall, whereas
Right.
written notes don't. You can write it down and then it's when you reread them, it's just all in front of you. It's not forcing your
Right.
brain to pull anything out. So that's a really good practice to,
Yeah, good.
yeah.
You're right. And I was always one of those, like, I always had like a kind of photographic memory too. So that's where at least notebooks helped me out a little bit, as I was kind of like able to draw a picture of like what the process was and kind of take that picture into my head. So that was kind of like my recall, where I was kind of like able to like
Perfect.
recall that picture and try and practice it over again. And yeah, like I said, flashcards are really just for the really hard struggle topics that I just could not understand. And then that's when I would fit those in with my mini sessions too, and just try and review those, and try and get that picture into my head as well. There's kind of a lot of use of photographic memory when it comes to
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
And then my next question, so this is kind of more like a more broad question. So, and maybe you kind of already talked about this, but what kept you going through all of it? He had that year and a half that was really difficult, and then still like had like hit like a wall or two even when you were passing exams. Like what was your big motivator? What kept you going?
Those people around me that just continued to believe in me that I could pull this off. I mean, I have my two brothers. I have a very close girlfriend I've been with for a very long time. Some really close friends that I've known way back into high school, and they were always just kind of like my rocks that just like kind of always like served as that motivator. Just like keep going, keep sticking with it. Of course, I work in public accounting too, so I have a very supportive firm that in that regard too. I mean, if I had those times where I was down or I was getting those 74s, it's like just keep at it. It's probably one of the big lessons, where the CPA exam is more of a test of your persistence and will, just as much as it is a test of your knowledge. A lot of it, yeah, it was just those people that were around me that helped push me, and then just a lot of it was for myself too, to just say is like, the pass rates overall for the CPA exam are less than 50%, and that was always kind of like one of my motivators. Like, I want to be one of those 50% that could say that they did it.
Yeah. Yeah. So on
Sure.
that note,
That's awesome.
the year you kind of took off hanging out with your friends, basically, what kind of things, what were they supportive during that whole year? I'm sure they kind of like teased you once in a while, but like how was that dynamic the year you took off, like hanging out basically?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, there was definitely a fair amount of, I guess you could call it teasing. There was just like, man, like you've gone absolutely crazy. It's like at least give yourself some time in order to like
Mhm.
take it back a little bit. It's just like, no, you don't realize how bad that I want this. And I think that was an ultimate driver is like just how bad I really wanted to get through this and say that I could do it. To where I was just like I was willing to put off everything else at that point. But again, as I mentioned, they were still very supportive. They while they weren't the biggest fans of me taking that year off, they
Yeah.
were very supportive and understanding in the circumstances. Like he's got to do this for himself.
Yeah. So did you throw a big party when you got your last score?
Oh yeah, I mean it was probably like at least a week long party where it was just like a different group of people that just wanted to spend the time with me. It's like I haven't seen you in like a year and a half and everything, so tell me about the experience and like let's have a few drinks and everything. So
Yeah,
it was definitely a fun week long of celebrations there.
that's awesome. Yeah, really cool. Let's see. You have any other questions, Logan? I
I
guess,
mean, yeah, it sounds awesome.
yeah, the final two, they're closely related, I guess, but was there anything else we didn't cover? Any other study strategies or I don't know, anything about this process that you want to mention as in terms of like what might be helpful to somebody else?
Uh, Trying to think. Not offhand. I know like leading up to test day, I always took the recommendation of showing up to the test center about an hour and a half early to get those final reviews into it there. And then just making sure that you have take that time to at least take care of yourself, get that good night rest of everything like that. And just making sure that you're comfortable actually going into the testing center. Because if you're going in as an anxious wreck, you're not going to like the results that you're going to see coming out of it there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's probably like the key thing I would say to anybody is like make sure you're taking care of yourself as you're going through this there because I mean you're not going to be at your best if you aren't doing so. So it's a matter of take care of yourself and do what you need to do. The results will be much better off when you do something like
Yeah.
that.
And again, that idea, which, it's obviously true, that's a lot easier when you only need to study, 2, 3 hours a day so that you can have that balance, right? Whereas
Exactly.
your first year where you had no balance, that just gets even taking care of yourself or like sleeping enough gets really hard. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, it definitely is. Yeah, make sure you're taking care of yourself, and yeah, always doing your mini sessions. I think those are probably the biggest difference maker. Really, was just reinforcing that material, and then just really following what the pro course videos was. Because I mean, I to summarize, I mean, I pretty much followed those pro course videos to a T as far as what my process was. Obviously, with a few tweaks here and there as far as like what I might be able to do or like spacing it out and everything. But ultimately, yeah, just make sure you're getting your main sessions, your mini sessions, get your final reviews in, and if you do that, I like your odds in passing the exam.
Yeah. I was just going to say that, like, just from all the stuff you've mentioned, I was going to bring that up, that you clearly really understood what was in the pro videos. So yeah, you basically just mentioned that. So when you first signed up, I'm guessing you went in there, watched those like pretty carefully. Did you ever revisit them or did you just watch them once and you just kind of had the whole process?
Yeah, so sometimes I would go back to select videos out of it, specifically the planting the seeds video, just to kind of like remind myself of the process there. And then as I got closer to exam day, I would look at the mega cram session video
Mm,
and making sure I put that in the last like 2 to 3 days leading up to the exam day. And I mean, I would do the same thing as far as like, as like constant simulations, constant re-review of multiple choice questions. That's when note cards really became a thing, is like that mega cram session is like making cards on those topics that you're getting wrong and then just constantly re-reviewing those all the way up until exam day. And
yeah.
it was actually amazing in the sense where there was a couple of times I did make those flashcards and I'm sitting in the parking lot of the testing center waiting to go in and I'm going through the first test of the exam and like in the first few questions, like I literally just saw it like 10 minutes ago when I was reviewing my flashcards there. So I was like, beautiful. Like that
Yeah.
works out great. That felt like 3 points at that point.
That
That's
happened to
exactly
me
it. Yep.
every single time. I
Right.
would do my hour of flashcards in the car, go in, and I first Tesla it every time. I saw like
Yeah.
seriously 4 or 5 things that I had just reviewed. Anyways, yeah. You have one more thing, Logan, or
No, no, I was just saying that's exactly it. Yeah,
oh
like that you just basically said, exactly what the point of all those things is, is so that on test day you're like, I've seen that. Like I just saw that, or I know this, like that's the whole point of everything that we have. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. So I think we've kind of covered everything. We're at the hour mark. So yeah, that was really, really cool to hear your story, Matt. I didn't realize the first year and a half part of your story, which sounds pretty painful. But having gone through that, then this last year where you were able to, without even, without passing, you were able to kind of get your life back, study less, you're still, you start passing the exams, and then eventually you're just done. So yeah, I'm glad you saw that YouTube ad and that it helped. And congrats on being done.
Yeah,
Appreciate
congrats.
that. Thank you. No, it's a big weight off the shoulders at this point now, and I'm always rooting for those that are continuing to take on the exams. And best thing I can say is just keep persistent because you can do it. It's
Yep.
possible.
Yep. Definitely.
All right, that was the interview with Matt. I think that was a great interview, and again, it was awesome to be able to see that transformation where he was struggling so much for a year and a half, not passing any exams, and then all it took was changing some of his strategies and changing the way he studied, and he was able to start watching football on Sundays again, spending time with family and friends, and he didn't feel like he was working nearly as hard because the strategies made him so effective. I'm sure you found the interview helpful, and before you go, I just want to give one more reminder about the Superfast CPA training webinar on superfastcpa.com. Again, we will teach you, just like we taught Matt, how to pass the CPA exam effectively and efficiently so that you don't waste months or years of your time. Also, make sure to share this podcast with anybody you know who is going through the CPA exams. This podcast is the best free training resource out there for CPA exam candidates. If you like the episode, make sure to leave a rating in your favorite podcast app or to like and comment on the YouTube video. Thank you so much for watching or listening, and we will see you in the next episode.